Hey everyone. So in this video, I just want to talk about Project Catalyst data sources and why they're so important to get right to help really unleash the community and so it can reach the tools and processes and innovations can really reach their full potential. So let's have a look at some of the existing problems we have with Project Catalyst data. First of all, we have a problem with data access. So there's no defined way to access data at the moment. For instance, for IdeaScale data, you would either have to kind of scrape that data in some way or kind of add a script and send it off to IOG for them to kind of manually retrieve that data. And then for some other kind of forms of data, sometimes that is manually kind of retrieved through documentation that you can find. So the kind of result of this as well is lack of clarity on how to access data means that data correctness is also an issue. So there's no assurances that however you're accessing this data, the data is correct. It can be very ad hoc. And this environment produces like a really high friction situation to develop solutions. Whether it's manual data requests or manual data extraction, this makes it really difficult to create any kind of reliable, accountable solutions built on top of it. And part of this kind of is this kind of lack of programmable access to the data. So if you had programmable access to the data, you could pull this kind of data in more automatically into some of your tools rather than have to do manual kind of changes that are much more prone to making mistakes or just being completely out of date. So ultimately, it kind of leads to this complete lack of automation. Another problem is accountability. Because of this no defined way to access the data, there's no one who's accountable for making sure that data is available, which is creates this kind of process for who to go to make sure things are correct and for asking questions and anything related to that data source. And the aggregation of these problems means that there's many community proposals and ideas that are blocked. We have two proposals, improve proposal information and project tracking in our proposal information, that are really kind of blocked because they need some reliable base of information that's easy to access. So if we move on to why is this data so important? Why is the data access so important? So at the moment, it's if you had access to all this data, it would be much easier to innovate. If you have all of the data and all of that access, then you can create more ideas and experiment with a lot more things rather than being limited to what's available. With that good data access, you'd have tools that could reach their potential. So if you have all of that data access, you can create any of the different kind of functionality that you had ideas for, and you're not blocked by not having access to the right level of information. And the better that data access is, the stronger that we can actually mirror existing tools. So if data is, especially if it's in a programmable kind of API or code repository kind of source, you can make sure that your tooling is really up to date, which means you can actually make alternatives to existing tools or processes that then provide that alternative experience to help to push the ecosystem forward by trying to innovate in certain areas. And the more that we can kind of make data available and easy to access, the more we can prevent these ultimatum situations. The longer that the tool makers and community doesn't have access to this data, the less kind of alternatives we're going to have as the catalyst scales. And that leads to this situation where some of the existing processes and tools could completely break down and just not be functional at a certain scale. And in that scenario, we want to have as many different ideas and innovations tried and tested so the community has a way to kind of think about, okay, these are some options that are good to prevent this problem, rather than being put in this situation where we have to solve this problem right now and make decisions without having that kind of foresight and time to really explore different ways to solve that problem. And then finally, the kind of benefit of having a really reliable set of level of access to all this information is you can start to extend this. All the data that we have is nice and aggregated, and then you can start to extend the existing data. So you can look at different kind of areas to add data, such as adding media, progress reports, or improving the identity data. So what is kind of the next steps for what we're kind of looking for this the future of these data sources? So what do we need? And that would be, we could do a clear scopes for each of the data sources that there are. It should be clear on what data is available for each of those different kind of tools or processes that make up the ecosystem and this kind of catalyst governance process. We need the data to be correct. So the data provider should be correct and reliable. We want easy access, so it would be easy to find and always available. And that also kind of applies to make sure it's completely equal access. There's no one who's got like any preference kind of situation where they get access to the data before someone else, or they're being preferred because their tools at the moment more popular. By having easy access, you want to have this kind of like equal access, so everyone kind of has access to it at the same time and use it however they like to. And then Fourth is this programmable access. So ideally, we'd like to have API code repository-based data sources, so these tools can easily work with that data and have a way to pull it in a way that's much more programmable. And then finally, accountability. So if the core kind of data sources have some accountability, then that accountability can have a knock-on effect to the tool makers as well. So if they know that this data is the correct kind of way to get the sources of it, then they have more assurances they can provide in their own tooling that then kind of leads this higher quality kind of tools. So who is accountable at the moment for these kind of core processes? So realistically, it is the owner of a given tool or process. They are the ones who actually manage something and own, and the ones who are actually making changes to it. So the core tools at the moment are IdeaScale and the Catalyst Voting App, which means that at the moment, IOG are currently accountable for those, making sure the data is available for those core parts of processes and tools in the ecosystem. So, and this is not to say that the community cannot be involved in this. The community could be induced to help wherever possible on this, and that is fully up to IOG on whatever agreements they can make with the community to help kind of reduce the burden of making sure that this data is fully accessible. And ultimately, this accountability, as mentioned before, at the core leads to better quality tools that you can then, as long as that you have some assurances that this data is maintained properly, then it leads to knock-on effects for actually creating really more valuable tools higher up where other people are exploring and making alternative solutions. So on from that, what data should actually be included as core data sources? So if we look at it, fund data is a really good starting point. So for each funding round, we have challenges, challenge briefs, and a breakdown of what those challenges are and what kind of proposals should go in them. And then they have budgets. And then for each funding round, you also have the fund stages and the dates for each of those stages. So all of that data in aggregate kind of really tells you everything you need to know about a specific funding round. So maintaining that information would be a really good starting point for something that would be really valuable to the community if it's kept up to date and made kind of available as a data source. Following on from that, once those have been established, people then make proposals into those kind of challenges, and that gets done through IdeaScale, which includes the proposal information, media attachments, and everything to do with that kind of proposal. It also includes things like comments. Once that's all finished and finalized, then assessment data is kind of a next really important data source. So that means community advisors come in and make assessments on those proposals. And once that stage is done, veteran community advisors will then look at any of the filtered proposals from proposers that have flagged assessments or blank assessments. And then that's another valid kind of part of the assessment process. And then when that's all finished, all of that information and the filtered out assessments will get added to the voting app, and then people can use the governance process to vote on which proposal should get funding. And that then results in the fourth kind of area of data, which is this kind of voting data with the voting results and who are the actual funded proposals. So these are the four kind of main areas I think that are the really core kind of parts of the ecosystem at the moment. And when you think of those kind of four kind of main data sources, how could we think about how that data could be distributed? And I don't think there's any necessarily right or wrong answer to this. I think between either an API or different in code repositories in certain data formats, there's a lot of things that could be done and decided on by whoever's maintaining those kind of each of those data sources. There may be merit in keeping them separate, because then you could have separate teams who are responsible for, let's say, the fund data. There could be a small team that's responsible for that. So then you don't kind of centralize too much of the data in one place, meaning that you have to have a larger team, or there's more risk and responsibility for that kind of single source. So there could be merit to keeping them separate. And when we talk about what good and bad distribution means, it's just like making it easy for tool makers who are trying to build alternatives and innovations in the space on top of the existing data. So by making sure it's got this programmable access, it means using things like APIs and code repositories. And the reason that documents and social posts aren't ideal is because it just means this kind of manual data extraction. It can be quite good as a tool to present information and share that around the community, but is not as effective for developers who want to kind of add in some form of automation. So when you have this data changes and gets updated, you want some level of automation so you can make sure it's correct and pull it in automatically into your own tools. And then also, the more automation we can have, the more chance we have to mirror existing tools. So the more that we can actually create an experience that's up to date and live in comparison to like IdeaScale, and then you can actually start to push more and more people onto those alternative solutions, especially as they improve and they become a preferred solution to the existing one. And it helps to produce this more like natural evolution of trying different ideas out and letting them get adoption, because they are actually reliable sources of data and reliable alternatives. So that's kind of a good summary of the importance of data sources and some of the data that we think should be made formalized and be made available, hopefully ASAP. That's obviously the preference. And the good news is that the data actually already exists. So it's not going to be a mountain of work to obviously create the data. It's the next steps for this are really to formalize the processes and distribution of that data. So the real take home from this kind of presentation is that data is super important. It really kind of sets the groundwork to unleash the community to create these different tools and innovations that can be reliable and accountable, that the community can actually start using then as proper alternatives. And ultimately, the PACE team and everyone in the community are here to help. So if there's any way we can help with making sure these data sources are made available, then we come in with open arms to try and help and solve that problem. And we have also started a proposal for formalizing these data sources, which are linked to the bottom, that kind of goes through some of this similar content that I went through in this presentation that we've shared with IOG, and we're now starting to push forward and come to some solutions on. And that's it for this one. So thank you for watching. And if you have any ideas or thoughts on the importance of data sources, or you have any certain requirements for data sources, then leave them in the comments or reach out to us on Discord. If you go to our website, then we'd be happy to chat and see if we can help in any way. So thank you very much for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.